Yay, yay, yay. And we are live on the Gamification Revolution webinar, coming to you live from the overcast but slowly starting to be spring like New York City. I'm your host, Gabe Zichermann. Welcome, and I'm joined today by Jake Orlowitz, who's just outside Philadelphia in Bryn Mawr. Hi, Jake.
Hi, Gabe. Hello, everyone.
Yay for being here. And you guys, yay for you being here. If it's your first time on the Gamification Revolution, welcome, bienvenidos, bienvenue. You'll need to log in to this Spreecast platform using one of your social media accounts, any of them, but log in. And once you've logged in, you can do a few cool things. You can chat with everybody on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, depending on how your screen is set up. See all this chat, all the cool people who are here every week, all of our regulars. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. But also, you can ask Jake and I questions. You can either put them right into chat, or you can click those buttons down below that say question or camera. And if you have a camera, Nada or one of our producers will bring you on screen. You can ask us questions about anything that is relevant to this discussion, plus, whatever else. We're easygoing and we're friendly. But it is important that you get logged in and that you ask us these questions, because we are here for you. Now, every one of you knows, I'm sure by now, that G Summit is coming up in June. It's June 10th through the 13th, and Jake is one of our esteemed speakers who we're very much looking forward to seeing live and in person there. If you haven't yet registered for G Summit, it's a great time to do it now. The code is GAMREV, G-A-M-R-E-V, and the URL for the conference is gsummit.com. You want to get registered, use that code, save some money, come see me and Jake and 50 or so other people from a whole range of companies. We're announcing more companies every day, and as a small preview for you guys, viewers of the show, I will tell you that over the next 2 weeks, we'll be announcing two very major, very exciting keynotes that you haven't heard of yet, along with a batch of other speakers, cool speakers from great companies doing amazing things in engagement and gamification of employees and customers. You will want to register as early as possible, I promise you, for these two keynotes. That's something very, very important. So excited, so excited, so excited. And I want to turn our attention now to Jake for a second, who some of you may know, but some of you may not know. So Jake, you leverage gamification in doing some work for Wikipedia. Can you tell us a little bit about that project that you worked on?
Sure. So we built, I'm a grantee through the foundation that runs Wikipedia. So I work, I proposed this idea that we build an onboarding game, an interactive tutorial to teach new editors how to contribute. And I wrote up a proposal, I wrote up a script, it got funded. My first stop was G Summit in San Francisco, and the rest is history. We built the game, we finished our beta test in December, and are now rolling the game out widely. And this was a pretty novel. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So what was the concept behind it? Why did you even apply for this grant? What's the challenge that this idea was trying to solve?
Sure. So there are two really big problems. One, Wikipedia is very hard to learn how to contribute to. There are complex technical, social, and policy issues. There are hundreds of predictable frustration and pain points for new editors. And it's really discouraging very often to try and join our community. It's free. Anyone can walk in the door and make an edit. However, it's not easy. And so this was an effort to make it easier, to make it pleasurable and enjoyable and effective to onboard people. We also have some real big problems in our community when it comes to both diversity and the number of our most active editors. Our editors are 10 to 20% female, and most of our editors look like me and you. We've got some big gaps in diversity in our community. Yes, handsome. Handsome and not a lot on top, but yes. And then this other problem that the number of active editors, just folks who make more than 5 edits a month, has been declining on English Wikipedia from, say, 50,000 editors a month to closer to 30. So we are losing our core base of editors. And everyone at the Wikimedia Foundation is basically thinking about how to change that course.
Do you think, is that kind of often when we talk about the arc of an experience in gamification or game design for that matter, we talk about kind of how things get boring over time. So something that was a fun challenge, doesn't continue to be a challenge over time. And I know that your effort was about new editors, so I don't want to spend too much time belaboring
Sure.
this point. But the elder game, the thing that happens after you've mastered the main thing, is that part of the reason why people drop off editing? Can you talk about why people don't edit in the long term?
Yeah, I think you see this in a lot of mature organizations, and it's definitely something that gamification has been applied to address. But when Wikipedia started, anyone could come and write anything, and they did. And for the most part, you would just come up and you would write, here are all the things I know about. Here's my hometown. This is what I studied in college. This is my hobby. And you would write, and no one would bother you. And occasionally there'd be a little discussion. But there was so much space to roam, like early America, that there were just not the same kinds of conflicts about what people should write. I mean, there's always debate, but now it's very different. Now Wikipedia is ubiquitous. It's, top 1 or 2 search results on Google. Everyone goes there. So our articles are incredibly highly trafficked. There's constant debate. And I mean, also a lot of the easy articles, the low-hanging fruit, at least for topics that kind of the Western world is more familiar with. We still have some content gaps elsewhere, but have already been written. So the easy stuff is done, and now it's a question of, well, do you have deep expertise? Can you take this article from, it's complete, but can you make sure that it has the most up-to-date authoritative references, or it's well organized, but is the prose really lucid? Things that take just a higher level of expertise. And we have a mind-blowing number of policies, expansion of policies, and kind of bureaucracy creep that makes it more difficult to engage. There's a lot to learn just to kind of be conversant, even in just the jargon of how Wikipedia editors talk.
And to me, to be honest, what's interesting about it to me is, of course, now Wikipedia and the Wikimedia Foundation is a big nonprofit, one of the most important kind of open foundations of the internet. But one of the interesting things is everything that you've talked about just now is something that I think folks working in big companies, like private companies, large corporations, face when they think about how to create long-term interaction with their users. And we see kind of similar issues with Quora, which is not a competitor to Wikipedia, but another community of crowdsourced content. Do you think this kind of this sort of history, the arc, or the things that have happened at Wikipedia, are they kind of the canary in the coal mine for everybody who does this kind of long-term community stuff? Is there any, and I want to get back to your example in a second, but just thinking about this broadly, what advice would you give people who are building, say, more modest internal Q&A sites, for example?
I mean, I studied political theory in college, and we had Max Weber, who wrote about bureaucracy and talked about it as this inevitable thing that just happens in organizations. And we have no rules. One of our top 3 rules is ignore all rules if it will help you build the encyclopedia. And yet, even with that written into our Constitution, rules just evolve. We don't have a leader telling us what to do. We have community organized systems, but people create rules, and it's easy. Once something gets created, it tends to be used and linger, and it's harder to get rid of something once it starts. And our focus, I think, has been, sure, there's lots of stuff that is a little bit confusing, but let's just leave that be. Let's not go on a massive cleanup spree. Let's instead create some new spaces that have a different feel, that are more social, more supportive, more playful, more accessible, and more engaging. And let's, if the world of Wikipedia is a little bit, brash and complex, let's create some oases where editors can come and get help. So
and not feel like they're constantly making mistakes, right? Because
it's huge. It's huge.
How do you deal with that kind of negative reinforcement in Wikipedia? Because it feels like a lot of that, right?
So this is a great analogy, or a great little anecdote. For every edit on Wikipedia is recorded, and to undo someone's edit or revert their edit, all that you have to do is go into the article history. Anyone can click the View History tab on any article, see every edit, and you can click the Undo button. And with a single click, you can wipe out what someone just did, and it goes back to the stored version. It's not that you couldn't get theirs back, but it's basically just the shortest way to kind of push someone's contributions out. So we've had that undo button since the beginning of Wikipedia, more or less. Just this year, we added a button to thank someone for that edit. And just a really little thing like that, undo is important because we have a lot of vandalism. We have a lot of drive-by people who are just, you know, jerking around. And when we deal with that, it's not a problem. We have mechanisms to deal with that. But it just hadn't been thought of in the terms of what that also conveys to people when, from the best of intentions, they contribute and they didn't get it right because they're new or they don't understand our sourcing policies and they get reverted and it just feels awful.
Yeah, it feels, yeah, for sure. No question. What's the effect of the thank you button? Because the sense of thank you people is very powerful. Has there been any effect? Do we know what anything, what the
It's
reaction has
a
been to that?
it's a really new feature. It's really recent, in the last 6 months. So I don't think we have data on it yet, but I'm sure there will be talk about it at our Wikimania conference in London in August, and when we do kind of our yearly roundup, I'm sure it will get some attention. I can personally say that it's incredibly gratifying for me, even as long as I've been around on Wikipedia, that someone can just thank me for an edit, and now I get pinged. There's a little notification. It's very gratifying because a lot of the time, yeah, there just was not a mechanism to thank someone. You'd have to go to their talk page, leave them a message, and now it's just right there. Boom, somebody thanked you. And if I want to thank them, sometimes it's lightweight. I don't want to go and get into a whole conversation. I just want to be like, hey, that was great. Nice work. And now it's
You know,
easy.
yeah, I mean, and that seems like based on all the core psychology and behavioral econ and gamification that we know about, that should make people feel happy. And it sounds like it's worked for you heuristically, even if we don't have the data yet.
Yeah.
On a related note to that, so Michael Finney, one of our regular contributors here on the show, pulled up your G Summit profile, and in your G Summit profile, because you'll be speaking at the conference in June, it says you've made 30,000 edits to Wikipedia, which is, I mean, just a mind-blowing number, Jake. Okay, we'll talk at some point about how you're able to do all that and still function and have a life and do all the
Sure,
things
sure.
that you do. But then Nada asked this question, which is about editor leaderboards on
Hmm.
Wikipedia. And
Yeah.
what kind of construct exists for you guys inside the editorial community at Wikipedia to compare each other, know your scores? What's the feeling about things like leaderboards or other sorts of mechanics there?
Sure. So, the official story is that Wikipedia doesn't do gamification. If you ask most people in our community, they'll tell you that Wikipedia is a serious pursuit and that gamification is inappropriate for our community. Um, when I looked to do background research on how I would explain why gamification was a good idea, at least for onboarding, I did a full survey of existing aspects of Wikipedia that would fall under the umbrella of game dynamics, and there are a lot of them. First of all, we do have a list of editors by edit count, and
Oh,
I'm in the top 2,000. Hooray! There's some guy with 1 million. There are lots of people with more, but we don't put a lot of emphasis on that edit count leaderboard because some people go around and fix 3,000 typos a day, and that each edit counts. And another person might sit down and craft a well thought out, featured quality article uh, offline and upload it in a single move, and they get one edit for doing something which provides much richer content. So the edit count alone doesn't tell you enough. But so we don't emphasize that as a point metric because it would reward mere. I mean, I make a lot of small edits, for example, just because I tend to be paranoid that my browser's going to crash and I'm going to lose my ongoing work. So, like, does that make me a better contributor? No. I clog up the edit history with a bunch of small changes, but I feel comfortable working like that. So we have a leaderboard. We do. Um, we also have competitions. They're typically called Wiki Cups or core contests, and one group of articles or another. Editors gather in Wiki projects, which is kind of just like a work interest group. And every now and again, some of these groups will have competitions. So backlog clearing drives to copy edit articles, or um, competitions to improve the basic fundamental core articles like history and clothing and music, just those basic articles. So we do have or competitions to write new articles. So we have these competitions. We also have leaderboards. And when it comes to to badges we have an iconic way of thanking people called a barn star. And this is something where someone comes to your talk page, they paste a little template code, and it shows like, you have won the Barn Star of Diligence or the Barn Star of Originality. And Barn Stars are neat because someone has to give them to you. They're not automated. So it's like a personal gift. The difference between Barn Stars and badges is Barn Stars are not given for skill acquisition, and they're not given for regular achievement. They're given for some kind of exceptional, unexpected accomplishment.
Got it.
And so in that sense, they're really meaningful because they're completely unpredictable. And they're given directly by a person. But we don't have skill badges or role badges. And that was something that I sought to play with in the Wikipedia venture. So I knew that the community would not be comfortable with badges. For some reason, our community feels like badges are some kind of jokey way of certifying people, and they're worried that editors will just run around trying to collect badges, which, they'll game the system. And so I took it in, first of all, it was much easier to play with gamification on Wikipedia because we were just doing onboarding. So we were not gamifying the actual site. We were just gaming the learning experience of becoming a contributor. And that gave me a lot more freedom to play. But I will tell you that about 2 months into the 6-month or 8-month project, I get a message on my user page that says, your article has been, not just your article, the entire set of pages I've been working on has been proposed for deletion. And someone in the community had come along and said, what are you doing trying to attract kids? That's totally wrong for Wikipedia. And there was that immediate link in someone's head, that a more traditional or old-fashioned or curmudgeonly view that if something was fun, if it was playful, then clearly it was for kids and only for kids and couldn't contribute to a serious pursuit.
Wow.
And so I had
your whole project got suggested for deletion in the classic kind of, someone's come along and said Smackdown in Wikipedia. How interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so how did you deal with that?
Well, I mean, like everything on Wikipedia, I had to make my case and discuss why this was not the case. And luckily, there had been some other precedents. We have a new editor help space, which called the Tea House, which has gotten a lot of good press on Wikipedia. It's somewhere you can come and ask questions, but it has a nice visual style of a Japanese Zen garden, and it has some rules for conduct and thanking people and saying hello and just basic manners that you don't always find on the internet. Not telling someone to read the manual and not just giving them a link, but actually explaining things to them, like just real basic helper manners. And Tea House had great results before I started with its data. It increased editor activity about 3 times, and also it increased the number of female editors by about 3 times.
Oh, wow.
So that was definitely something I pointed to. And then I also acknowledge that, in the grant space, we have an individual grants program that's really neat because it's all experiment based. So we run these 6-month, lightweight, under $30,000 grants, often much lower than that. And we'll have 5 or 8 of them going at a time. And they're all designed to be an experiment, to try something novel. And there's a great group of people on Wikipedia who are kind of in a minority, but who have a heck of a lot of fun trying to create spaces and processes on Wikipedia that are playful, are thoughtfully designed, are socially supported and well curated. And it's not that we're trying to change what Wikipedia is. Like, Wikipedia has a great edge to its culture. People are really intellectual and willing to do intellectual combat. The problem is that just doesn't work for everyone. There's a demographic that does not want to come home from a long day of work and get into a 3-day argument about whether or not we should capitalize the in Beatles, which is an actual debate that we've had for
So
weeks.
first of all, let me just say, bless you and all the people who do that and who have the patience for that. It's crazy, and folks are going wild in the chat. There's so many ideas coming out of this group that I think people want to share and talk
Great.
about a little bit in terms of how the Wikipedia process can be improved, which is amazing. I love how engaged everyone is with that. But can we just back up for a second, Jake? And for those of you, by the way, want to follow Jake, his Twitter handle's up there. It's Jake Orlowitz at Twitter. And I recommend that you do. Just backing up for a second. So what did you actually do? What is the project that you ended up doing?
Sure. Okay, so you know those little guided tours that happen when you go to a new website and they point you around the interface? Well, we finally got one of those set up on Wikipedia. We adapted it from a WordPress guiders library. It's open source and all good. So, and it was designed to be used to show someone the basic elements of the page. But when this came around, I thought, oh, well, this is a fairly robust tool. I can use this as my game engine. So I created a guided tour which has about 150 steps to it. You wouldn't even know that you're on a guided tour. It feels like you're in an interactive narrative. And we built a 7-mission game where you are invited by a simulated editor. We use some API magic to make it look like people are interacting with you. That was our very crude AI. And they invite you to help them work on a simulated version of the article Earth. We picked Earth because who can argue that Earth is not a universal topic? And you go through a series of missions and challenges helping build out the article on Earth. And it has a neat narrative, and you learn gradually deeper skills, you gradually get more interactions with other editors, you eventually run into someone who's a little bit challenging and you have to figure out how to deal with them. A big focus on the game was, can you understand our policies in simple, plain language? And can you figure out thoughtful, intelligent, human ways to talk to other editors? Can you get your point across clearly and kindly? There was a big emphasis on that. And when at the end of the day, you've created a really beautiful looking article with lovely pictures of Earth, and it's got great actual content, which I took from our simplified version of Wikipedia. And throughout this, as you're making edits and adding images and wiki links, you're getting badges. You're getting the wiki linker badge, and you're getting the neutrality badge. And as you complete tasks and answer questions, you accumulate these kind of, I did them as role badges. So rather than it being like the wiki link badge for adding a link to another page, I called it the wiki linker badge because I wanted to get that sense of identity more in people's heads, that you are someone who now possesses these skills.
So very interesting. So that's very interesting, right? I wonder what I'm struck by when I listen to you talking about how you designed this and how you structured it is really your onboarding process is almost like a cultural training. Not that different from training anybody on a kind of culture, except that your culture has, a lot of editorial elements to it, and it's got an expressive element to it. Was it complicated for you to kind of distill down those cultural elements? Was that contentious? How do you actually turn that into a mission, for example?
For me, it's just been a passion of mine to understand and distill Wikipedia's culture. So my political theory background makes me really enjoy reading policy pages and reading reams of them. And then my teaching background makes me like to help new editors. So I have, from the beginning, been working in help spaces with hundreds, if not thousands, of new editors, trying to distill the basic policies for them. And I wrote text guides to do that. But they just weren't getting the kind of uptake. You can write a really long single-page guide, but it doesn't captivate, and most people aren't going to read it.
Sure.
So I was sitting around one night. It was summer in 2011, hot summer in Philadelphia, and I was like, all this stuff, all this knowledge that I've distilled, like, wouldn't it be more fun if you could experience it rather than just read it? And it was just this kind of, I should make a game flash, and it should be about a journey through Earth. And like, I just wrote, I wrote the script, and the head of the individual grants program was specifically attracted to the notion that we were teaching cultural cultural lessons about Wikipedia. It wasn't just we're building a video game. It was we're teaching people about our culture and how to improve not just Wikipedia but also to improve our culture. We have some rough spots in our culture.
I mean, I would say to you, this is a universal challenge. I think you could take what you've been talking about and apply that literally any company, any organization, because there's always this cultural onboarding piece that's kind of meaningful. So what about the results of this early assay? What can you say about how people give you feedback, what you know about it, what effect has it had?
My favorite quote that I'm happy to humble brag about is someone said, I've seen a lot about gamification in my company, and this is the best example of gamification I've seen to date. So
Awesome.
that was a huge acknowledgement for me. That made me beam. We did qualitative and quantitative analysis. So we invited 10,000 editors, new editors, to play, and about 6% of them started the game, and those who played the game were about twice as likely to make made about twice as many edits. They also were more likely to make 20 plus edits, so they were more likely to be highly active. And what is our last key statistic? Well, anyway, yes, they liked it. They rated it consistently between 4 and 5 on a satisfaction scale, and they didn't just like the overall experience. They specifically, in our qualitative surveys, we specifically asked them, did you like the game design aspects of this? Would you have preferred a more serious tone? And it was above 80%, 88% said, no, we liked this game being playful. We did not want it to be so serious.
So that sounds like a major breakthrough, right? I mean, being able to take that back to the organization and say, no, look, here's some empirical evidence that this approach works is actually a pretty significant breakthrough. Does that portend more gamification at Wikipedia? What does that mean for the future? What's on the roadmap?
Well, I mean, for me, for one, it gives me backing to roll out the Wikipedia adventure more broadly. So we're continuing the invites, and there will be 10,000 people getting invited to play every month, and now we have some links to it and prominent new editor onboarding pages. So that's good. In terms of broader gamification, there's a lot that we can do, but I think Wikipedia might be at the same place that some of the gamification industry is, where they're just not comfortable calling things that help learning and motivation and engagement be called gamification. So we're almost getting to this point where people are really coming around to aspects of this, but they're still scared of the concept and the concept of gamification. At least in our community, they are.
I feel like that's obviously an omnipresent discussion, but my contention has always been you just have to ride that out, because over time, as it becomes more broadly adopted, I'm sure your records at Wikipedia will show that it goes from nobody using this word in 2010 to having thousands of people with it in their LinkedIn profile. That we just did this research at Gamification Co recently. So what happens over time as these ideas kind of bring themselves into the community. So Seamus was saying, I think one comment from Seamus, and there were a whole bunch of them, but I just want to kind of bring this up to you. So Seamus was sort of echoing your vision for this idea about degrees, or a focus on people doing actions and learning different roles rather than specific little details about the things that they want to do. It seems like there's a lot of potential to extend that beyond where you are now, to work on the elder game, to work on deepening people's experience and deepening their knowledge and moving them forward. What about for people who consume Wikipedia? Do we care about connecting them to this experience? I've always thought about the connection between the expertise that you get from consuming a authoritative source like Wikipedia, and then that in the rest of your life. Is there any kind of interest in how we might engage the readers of Wikipedia, or do we feel pretty good about them?
A lot of what's going on in our new interface design changes, which are coming down the pipeline, and Wikipedia still does not really have a WYSIWYG editor. We're kind of stuck in '96 in some ways.
Right. It's like Markdown, I remember from.
Yeah, it's still which is incredibly powerful, but not so easy to learn. Anyway, Yeah, for readers, I think anyone who consumes Wikipedia the way that most people consume Wikipedia, which is, almost without, uh, well, not without skepticism, but just reflexively goes to Wikipedia multiple times a day, often. Any reader should be familiar with how Wikipedia functions. And I can't think of a better, more fun way than to spend. The game only takes an hour. So I would love for readers to play this game and just get a look behind the scenes. It's an absolutely astounding community that has accomplished so much. I mean, we have 20 million registered editors. Um, but only this core band of 80,000, who just have devoted themselves to this. I think, and one of the game teaches if nothing else, it teaches an appreciation for how freaking awesome what we've done is.
Well, and I am incredibly appreciative of what you've done, and thanks so much for joining us today, Jake. You can all follow Jake on Twitter at Jake Orlowitz, which is easy to find you, and I recommend that you do, and you can join Jake and me and 50 or so other amazing speakers, new ones to be announced every day as we go forward at G Summit. Use the code GAMREV to register, save $200. It's gsummit.com. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in June. Between now and then, we'll be doing 2 of these approximately a week. Even if it kills me, we're going to do 2 of these approximately a week, and you're going to get a chance to chat with some of our most exciting speakers in the run-up to it. Jake, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks, Gabe.
And thanks to all of you for joining us on the Gamification Revolution. We'll see you again next week when we'll have more discussions about engaging employees and consumers. In the meantime, everybody, keep having fun. See you soon.